Hi there, knife people, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I'm going to completely reassemble this full-size Benchmade Claymore automatic knife. Here are the reasons that I am only going to show the reassembly of this knife. Reason number one, if you need help disassembling it, you shouldn't be doing it at all. Reason number two, if you would not attempt taking apart and putting back together a carburetor from a 1981 Toyota Corolla, which requires a lot of ingenuity and dexterity, I wouldn't recommend you starting this project. Simply package the knife, ship it to Benchmade, and 3 to 5 weeks later, you'll have it back in perfect order. And believe me, it's worth the $10 that you will spend on the postage. But if you are adventurous, here you go. I made it look easy. This is how many steps it took to reassemble this knife. And what I did here, I placed parts against every step after second or third time of reassembling it so that I can create a more organized video for you. So you don't have to do it, but I highly recommend it. Safety lever, liner and the screw, first coil spring, brass washer, spring housing, the blade, push button, back stop pin, front stop pin with threads, brass washer, second liner, the second coil spring, and the push button spring. After step 11, it gets more self-explanatory. Place the front scale on your work surface. That's the one with the slot for the safety lever. Place the safety lever into the slot on the scale so that the detent ball is pointing upward or toward you. Place the first liner, that's the one with the spring for the safety lever detent, onto the scale. Make sure it fits in all indentations. Now secure it with a screw. It does not have to be super tight. You'll come back to it later. Check the safety lever for function. Grab the first torsion spring. Insert the hooked tab under the liner and make sure that the hook protrudes through the hole. Also make sure that the flat tab is pointing to 1 o'clock. If the flat tab is pointing at 4 o'clock, that means you grabbed the wrong of the two springs. Now take the copper washer and slide it on so that the flat tab is above the washer and visible to you. Grab the spring housing. As you will see, it will have a hole which is kind of split in the middle by the internal flange. Thread that hole onto the protruding tab so that this tab is now under that internal flange, but still visible to you. Grab the blade now. Figure out the blade orientation. Now rotate it way out there. Point the blade at 1 o'clock and drop it onto the protruding spring tab. Apply downward pressure to the housing and rotate the blade. Be careful, the blade is under tension now. After making sure it rotates freely under tension, return it into 3 o'clock position. I like to use some kind of spacer support. In this case, it's just a piece of cardboard under the blade. And now using my right hand to apply serious downward pressure on the blade. Now insert the back stop pin into the liner. When inserting the front stop pin, make sure that the threaded side of it is pointing up. The threaded and unthreaded sides are really hard to tell apart, so you need to be absolutely sure. If you get it wrong and the threaded side is not up, you will end up having to disassemble entire knife when you realize that you cannot screw in and secure that stop pin. Give me a like or write a comment if you think you can guess how I learned that valuable lesson. Once it's in, you're ready to install the push button. The flat side should be pointing toward the center of the pivot. Notice the tension on my index finger on the right hand. You have to apply immense pressure to the blade through this whole procedure. But by now you would have learned why I say that if you forgot to do so. Now place the washer. As you can see, the spring is not in yet. That's important that you do not try to install the second torsion spring. Now line up the liner with a flat on the push button and then rotate it in place. It will click in place with an unmistakable Benchmade style click. Now it's time to put in the torsion spring. As you can see, now the hooked tab is pointing at 10 o'clock. You have to press down on it and rotate it, insert it in the hole. The torsion spring will look like it's sitting in a little bit crooked. As long as the tab is engaged in the hole and the spring is not unspringing, you're okay. Now place the push button operating spring onto the push button. Drop in the gray backspacer. Install the scale by carefully aligning it first. Look through it to see if you aligned, and then put it quickly and firmly until you hear a snap. You will feel if one of the springs lets go because it will give you a feedback in the hand. The snap should be similar to placing a liner. As soon as you can, secure the scale with at least one screw. You have to keep applying pressure downward on the scale because you let go of the blade now. So work quickly, but don't mess up. Once you have the 3 screws installed, you should be okay. Also notice that I haven't installed the pivot nut or the pivot screw yet. And don't forget the D-nuts that hold the backspacer to the scales. If you successfully got to this step, I have nothing else to teach you. In fact, you can now teach anybody you choose to. This was hard, and the hard part is over. All you have to do is put hardware in, drop in the pivot, and you're basically done. Unfortunately, I can't recommend testing the functionality until the full assembly is completed. All you can do is peer into the frame, into the liners, to see if anything looks weird. Once you have the pivot in, you have to secure it. Remember, this particular knife does not have a stop for the pivot screw. In other words, you can technically over-tighten it if you go too far. And also, you might have noticed that I did not apply Loctite. I skipped this step for the purpose of expediency in creating this video. All that's left is to check the function, starting with the safety, push button, operation looks good, everything seems to be working. What a great knife this Claymore is. I really like it. I just need to carry it more. I hope it was helpful and made your experience a little easier.